Most older men don't lose women because they lack confidence, money, or experience. They lose themselves long before that, and no one ever warned them how it happens. If you've ever felt suddenly confused in a connection that started with excitement, if you've ever wondered why the more you give, the more distant she becomes, if you've ever felt drained after interactions that were supposed to feel intimate, then stay with me, because what you're about to hear is rarely said out loud. This isn't about blaming women. This isn't about becoming cold or cynical. This is about understanding a psychological pattern that quietly traps capable, intelligent, emotionally disciplined men. The most dangerous relationships don't start with disrespect. They start with admiration. They don't feel toxic at first. They feel flattering, intense, even rejuvenating, and that's why they work. Older men are targeted not because they are weak, but because they are stable, because they listen, because they don't panic, because they've built something worth attaching to. What no one tells you is this: when interest isn't genuine, it doesn't reveal itself through obvious red flags. It reveals itself through confusion, through emotional exhaustion, through a slow erosion of clarity. By the time most men realize what's happening, they're already negotiating their boundaries, questioning their instincts, and calling discomfort connection. In this video, we're going to dismantle the illusion. You'll learn how to tell the difference between desire and dependency, attraction and access, intimacy and control. And if you listen carefully, without ego, without denial, you may recognize patterns that have been quietly shaping your choices for years. Stay until the end, because once you see this clearly, you will never unsee it, and it will change how you choose forever. Let's start with something most men never question, but absolutely should. The emotional state you're in when you're around a woman is not random. It's information. Your nervous system is giving you data long before your logic catches up. And one of the clearest signals you can ever learn to read is this: genuine interest feels calm and consistent, not confusing or exhausting. When a woman is truly interested in you, you don't feel like you're walking on shifting ground. You don't feel the need to constantly monitor her mood, decode her messages, or replay conversations in your head trying to figure out what you did wrong. There's a steadiness to the connection, not boredom, not indifference, but emotional stability. And for many men, especially older men, that stability feels unfamiliar, not because it's wrong, but because they've been conditioned to associate attraction with emotional intensity. Here's the uncomfortable truth: chaos is often mistaken for chemistry. If every interaction feels charged, dramatic, or emotionally urgent, that doesn't mean the connection is deep. It often means it's unstable, and instability creates addiction. Your brain stays alert, waiting for the next emotional high or low. You feel pulled in, not grounded. That's not desire building, it's your nervous system being overstimulated. Genuine interest doesn't hijack your focus, it sharpens it. Think about this carefully. When something is real, it integrates into your life without friction. When something is manipulative or performative, it creates constant friction. You feel mentally tired after conversations that shouldn't be tiring. You feel relief when there's distance, and anxiety when there's closeness. That emotional whiplash is not romance. It's a signal that something is misaligned. A woman who genuinely wants you doesn't leave you guessing where you stand. Not because she over-explains, but because her behavior is coherent. Her words, tone, and actions match over time. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means predictability in character. You know what version of her you're going to get, and that predictability creates safety. Manipulative interest, on the other hand, thrives on inconsistency. Hot one day, cold the next. Affection followed by withdrawal. Praise followed by subtle disrespect. This keeps you emotionally invested because you're always trying to get back to the good version of her. And the more experienced you are as a man, the more dangerous this can be. because you assume you can handle it. You assume your emotional control makes you immune. It doesn't. Even disciplined men get worn down by prolonged emotional confusion, and over time, that confusion erodes your clarity, your standards, and your self-trust. You start questioning your instincts. You start negotiating with behavior you would never tolerate in any other area of life. Here's a simple test most men never run. After interacting with her, do you feel more centered or more scattered? Genuine interest leaves you feeling settled. You may feel challenged, intrigued, even energized, but not destabilized. You don't feel like you need to prove yourself. You don't feel rushed into emotional decisions. You don't feel like silence is a punishment. The connection breathes, it has rhythm. When interest isn't genuine, urgency replaces rhythm. Everything feels time-sensitive. She needs reassurance now. She needs attention now. She needs emotional reactions now. And if you don't respond immediately, something feels off. That's not attraction. That's control disguised as closeness. Psychologically, this matters because humans bond through regulation, not stimulation. Real intimacy is built when two nervous systems feel safe around each other. If your body is constantly on alert, you're not bonding, you're coping. And older men need to hear this clearly. Peace is not the absence of attraction. Peace is often the presence of maturity. Many men mistake calm interest for lack of passion because it doesn't spike their emotions the way chaos does. But passion that costs you your peace is not passion. It's a liability. Real desire doesn't need to destabilize you to feel alive. It adds depth, not noise. Pay attention to how often you're confused. Confusion is rarely accidental. When attraction is real, clarity emerges naturally. You may not know the future, but you know the present. You know where you stand emotionally. You know what's being offered. You're not constantly interpreting subtext. And here's where philosophy enters the conversation. A relationship, at its core, is not about intensity, it's about alignment. Alignment of values, pace, emotional capacity. When alignment exists, effort feels lighter. When it doesn't, even small interactions feel heavy. If you constantly feel like you're working to maintain interest, that interest is already slipping. Genuine desire doesn't need maintenance through emotional labor. It sustains itself through mutual respect and ease. This doesn't mean there will never be tension or misunderstanding, but tension in healthy dynamics leads to resolution. Tension in unhealthy dynamics leads to exhaustion, and exhaustion is the clearest sign of all. If you're tired, not physically, but mentally. If you feel emotionally drained after interactions that should feel connecting, something is wrong. Attraction should not feel like a second job. It should not consume your internal resources. It should enhance your life, not compete with it. Older men often pride themselves on resilience, on being able to endure, but endurance is not wisdom. Discernment is. Knowing when something costs more than it gives is not weakness, it's mastery. So slow down. Observe how you feel, not just what she says. Watch patterns, not promises. Let time reveal consistency. Calm is not boring. Calm is clarity. And the more you learn to trust calm, the less power confusion will ever have over you. Because when interest is genuine, it won't leave you exhausted. It will leave you steady. And when you choose steadiness, you stop chasing intensity and start choosing what actually lasts. There is a difference most men sense, but rarely articulate, and once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. It's the difference between a woman being interested in your life and being interested in your lifestyle. One feels grounding. The other feels flattering at first and draining later. And for older men especially, this distinction matters more than anything else. When a woman's interest is genuine, she becomes curious about the structure of your life. Not just the highlights, not just the rewards, but the rhythm, your routines, your responsibilities, your discipline. She wants to understand how you think, how you move through the world, how you protect your time. She doesn't just admire your success, she respects the systems that created it. When her interest isn't genuine, she skips all of that. She's fascinated by what you can provide, but indifferent to what it costs you to provide it. She enjoys the comfort, the access, the experience, but shows little patience for the constraints that come with them. She wants the benefits of your stability without adapting to the reality that created it. And that's the first red flag most men ignore, because admiration feels good. Attention feels validating, especially if you've spent years building yourself quietly, without applause. So when someone suddenly seems impressed, appreciative, excited by your presence, it's easy to assume it's attraction. But attraction that avoids your reality is not attraction, it's projection. A woman who is genuinely interested in you doesn't try to pull you out of your life. She tries to step into it. Watch how she responds to your schedule, your work, your obligations. If she sees them as obstacles to her happiness rather than foundations of who you are, pay attention. Real interest adapts. Fake interest resents. Psychologically, this comes down to something simple but profound: respect for structure. Mature attraction understands that a man's boundaries, routines, and priorities are not negotiable accessories. They are the core of his identity. A woman who wants you wants that core. A woman who wants what you offer will eventually push against it. And this pressure doesn't come loudly at first, it comes subtly. Small comments, small complaints. You work too much. You're always busy. You've changed. But what she's really saying is, your life doesn't revolve around me yet. That's not intimacy. That's entitlement forming. Another clear signal is how interested she is in the unglamorous parts of your life. Not the trips, not the dinners, not the status, but the ordinary days, the quiet moments, the consistency. A woman with genuine interest doesn't need constant stimulation. She values presence. She can sit with you in stillness without needing to be entertained. A woman who is only attached to your lifestyle gets restless in those moments. Silence makes her uncomfortable. Routine feels dull. She needs novelty to stay engaged because novelty is what she's actually attracted to, not you. Philosophically, this matters because desire rooted in external benefits is unstable by nature. Anything based on what you have rather than who you are is conditional, and conditions always change. Wealth fluctuates, energy shifts, circumstances evolve. If her interest is tied to outcomes instead of essence, it will fade the moment something requires sacrifice on her part. Notice how much effort she makes to meet you where you are. Does she adjust? Does she compromise? Does she show curiosity about your values, your past decisions, your future vision? Or does everything flow one way, toward her comfort, her preferences, her emotional needs? Real attraction is reciprocal. It moves toward balance. Transactional attraction keeps score, and older men often fall into this trap because they're used to being providers. They confuse usefulness with desire. But being needed is not the same as being chosen. One drains you over time. The other strengthens you. Here's a quiet test that reveals everything. Imagine removing the extras, the privileges, the advantages, the access. What's left? Would she still be interested in sharing space with you? Would she still respect your time? Would she still engage with curiosity and warmth? If the answer feels uncertain, that uncertainty is already your answer. Genuine interest doesn't spike when you give more and disappear when you give less. It remains steady. It doesn't treat your generosity like a faucet to be turned on and off. It appreciates without demanding escalation. Another important point most men miss is this. Women who are genuinely interested in you don't rush to benefit from your life before earning a place in it. They move with patience. They allow trust to build. They don't assume access. They understand that your world has rules because it took years to build. Manipulative interest skips steps. It fast-forwards intimacy, expectations, and privileges without building emotional foundation. And when you slow it down, resistance appears. Pay attention to resistance. Resistance to your pace. Resistance to your standards. Resistance to your boundaries. All of it signals misalignment. A woman aligned with you doesn't see your structure as a threat. She sees it as safety. And finally, reflect on how you feel about yourself around her. Do you feel respected or merely appreciated? Appreciation fades when conditions change. Respect endures. Respect is what allows a woman to admire your discipline even when it inconveniences her. Older men don't need more attention. They need alignment. They don't need excitement that disrupts their life. They need connection that fits into it. Because when a woman truly wants you, she doesn't try to extract value from your world. She tries to belong in it. And the moment you stop confusing admiration for alignment, you stop offering your life to people who only wanted the view. There is a pattern that appears again and again in relationships where men feel confused, drained, and quietly disrespected, and it almost always begins the same way. Strong emotion expressed very early with very little weight behind it. Intensity that feels flattering, even intoxicating, but collapses the moment it's tested. This is where many men mistake emotional display for emotional depth, and the cost of that confusion is always paid later. Emotional intensity without emotional accountability is not connection. It is performance. When a woman expresses admiration, affection, or vulnerability very quickly, it can feel like proof of interest. She opens up. She shares pain. She talks about how different you are, how safe she feels, how connected she feels. And because you are emotionally mature, you respond with understanding rather than skepticism. You assume sincerity. But sincerity is not measured by how deeply someone feels in a moment. It is measured by how consistently they act when emotions are no longer convenient. Genuine interest is patient. It unfolds. It allows time to reveal character. Fake interest rushes because it needs momentum. It needs you emotionally invested before you have a chance to observe patterns. And once you're invested, accountability becomes optional for her and exhausting for you. Accountability is simple. It means that when someone says something, their actions eventually support it. When they express need, they also accept responsibility. When they make a mistake, they don't collapse into defensiveness or disappear into silence. They stay present, they repair, they follow through. In unhealthy dynamics, intensity replaces accountability. Big emotions are used as substitutes for reliability. Tears replace solutions, passion replaces effort, vulnerability replaces responsibility, and if you question the inconsistency, you're made to feel insensitive, cold, or demanding. Suddenly, asking for alignment is framed as emotional cruelty. Psychologically, this is manipulation through moral reversal. Your need for clarity is turned into her evidence of your lack of empathy. And because you value emotional intelligence, you hesitate. You don't want to be the man who dismisses feelings. But honoring feelings does not mean excusing behavior. A woman who is genuinely interested in you does not use her emotions as shields. She doesn't say, "This is just how I feel," as a way to avoid accountability. She understands that feelings explain behavior, but they do not justify it. And most importantly, she understands that intimacy deepens when both people take responsibility for the impact they have on each other. Watch closely how she responds when her actions cause friction. Does she listen or does she escalate? Does she reflect or does she retreat? Emotional accountability shows up not when things are going well, but when discomfort enters the conversation. In relationships built on intensity alone, discomfort is avoided at all costs. Difficult conversations are delayed, deflected, or dramatized. Instead of addressing the issue, the focus shifts to how painful the conversation feels. The problem remains unsolved, but the emotion becomes the center of attention. This creates a dynamic where you're constantly managing her feelings instead of building a relationship. Over time, this drains even the strongest men. You become careful with your words. You anticipate reactions. You start suppressing your needs to keep the emotional temperature stable. And slowly, without realizing it, you abandon honesty for harmony. That is not maturity. That is self-erasure. Genuine emotional depth invites accountability because it seeks truth, not comfort. A woman who truly wants you is not afraid of losing approval by taking responsibility. She knows that respect is built through consistency, not intensity. Another revealing moment is how she handles expectations. Intense but shallow interest often comes with big emotional demands but little follow-through. She wants reassurance, presence, and prioritization, but struggles to offer reliability, patience, or understanding in return. The relationship becomes emotionally one-sided, even if the emotional expression seems mutual. Depth is reciprocal. It balances giving and receiving. It does not lean on one person to carry the emotional weight. Philosophically, this is the difference between impulse and intention. Intensity is impulsive, it reacts to feelings in the moment. Intention is disciplined, it considers long-term impact. Real intimacy is intentional. It chooses behavior that supports connection even when emotions fluctuate. And emotions will always fluctuate. Anyone who claims otherwise is selling fantasy. Older men must be especially cautious here because emotional intensity can feel refreshing after years of restraint. It can feel like being seen again, desired again. But desire that lacks responsibility becomes a burden. You don't feel energized by it, you feel responsible for maintaining it. Here is a question worth sitting with. When her emotions surge, do they bring you closer together? Or do they create distance and confusion? Do they lead to resolution or repetition? Patterns answer questions that words cannot. A woman who is emotionally accountable doesn't expect perfection from you, but she does expect honesty from herself. She doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. She doesn't use emotion as leverage. She understands that connection requires effort, humility, and repair. Intensity fades. Accountability endures, and the relationships that last are not built on how strongly two people feel in the beginning, but on how responsibly they treat each other when those feelings are tested. So don't be impressed by how deeply someone feels. Be attentive to how consistently they act, because emotion without accountability is noise, but accountability without drama is substance, and substance is what creates something worth keeping. One of the most reliable ways to understand someone's intentions has nothing to do with what they say, how affectionate they appear, or how emotionally expressive they are. It has everything to do with how they respond to limits. Boundaries are not obstacles to intimacy. They are the framework that makes intimacy possible. And the way a woman reacts to your boundaries will tell you more about her interest than any declaration ever could. A woman who is genuinely interested in you does not feel threatened by your boundaries. She feels oriented by them. Your clarity gives her a sense of where she stands, what you value, and how you move through the world. Boundaries signal self-respect, and self-respect is deeply attractive to emotionally mature people. It creates safety, not distance. But when interest isn't genuine, boundaries are experienced as rejection. The moment you say no, slow down, or hold your ground, the tone shifts. Not immediately, not dramatically at first, but subtly. Disappointment creeps in, then confusion, then accusation. You're told you've changed, become distant, less available, less caring. And suddenly your decision to protect your time or energy is framed as emotional withdrawal. This is where many men hesitate, especially men who pride themselves on fairness and emotional intelligence. You start explaining. You soften your language. You compromise your own needs to avoid being misunderstood. And without realizing it, you teach her that your boundaries are negotiable if enough emotion is applied. That lesson never leads anywhere good. Psychologically, boundaries activate very different responses depending on intention. When someone is sincere, boundaries provide structure. They remove ambiguity. They make expectations clear. But when someone has a hidden agenda, boundaries interrupt access. They slow down extraction. And that interruption creates frustration. Pay close attention to frustration. Frustration at your pace. Frustration at your independence. Frustration at your refusal to rush intimacy or reassurance. Frustration reveals entitlement forming beneath the surface. Genuine interest does not assume unlimited access to your time, attention, or emotional labor. It respects the fact that those things must be earned and maintained. Another revealing moment is how she responds to consistency. When you enforce the same boundary twice, does she adapt or does she escalate? Adaptation signals respect. Escalation signals resistance. And resistance to boundaries is not about closeness. It's about control. Control doesn't always look aggressive. Often it looks emotional. A woman with manipulative tendencies may not argue with your boundary. She may cry, withdraw, become cold, create distance, not to honor your space, but to make you uncomfortable enough to abandon your boundary voluntarily. This is emotional conditioning. You learn that holding firm leads to tension, while giving in restores harmony. Over time, you stop asserting yourself to keep the peace. That peace is an illusion. Real peace is built on mutual respect, not emotional compliance. Philosophically, boundaries represent the line between self and other. Healthy relationships exist where two complete individuals meet, not where one dissolves into the needs of the other. When someone reacts poorly to your boundaries, they are revealing discomfort with your autonomy. And attraction that requires you to shrink is not attraction worth keeping. Older men often struggle here because they confuse flexibility with maturity. They believe that being accommodating is a sign of wisdom, and in many contexts it is. But flexibility without limits becomes self-betrayal, and self-betrayal erodes respect faster than any argument ever could. Watch how she interprets your no. Does she hear it as information or as injury? A woman who is emotionally secure understands that a boundary is not a verdict on her worth. It is simply a reflection of your capacity. She doesn't personalize it, she adjusts. A woman whose interest is conditional personalizes everything. Your boundary becomes proof that she is losing influence. And influence, not intimacy, is what she is actually attached to. Another important signal is how she treats your boundaries in public versus private. Does she respect them consistently, or only when it benefits her image? Respect that disappears when it's inconvenient is not respect, it's performance. True respect doesn't require an audience. Boundaries also expose how someone handles disappointment. Disappointment is inevitable in any relationship. What matters is whether disappointment leads to dialogue or drama. Genuine interest leads to conversation. Manipulative interest leads to emotional pressure. If every boundary conversation ends with you feeling guilty, drained, or responsible for her emotional state, something is deeply misaligned. You are no longer two people negotiating a relationship. You are one person managing another's reactions. That is not partnership, that is caretaking. And here is the paradox most men miss. Boundaries do not push away the right woman. They reveal her. The right woman becomes calmer around your boundaries, not more anxious. She doesn't need constant access to feel secure. She trusts the connection because it is grounded in mutual respect, not constant reassurance. The wrong woman tests boundaries not because she is curious, but because she is assessing how much she can get away with. And each time you bend, the testing increases. So stop asking whether your boundaries are too strict, too cold, or too much. Start asking whether the person in front of you is capable of respecting another human being's limits. Because anyone who truly wants you does not need unlimited access to feel close to you. They need clarity, they need consistency, they need integrity. And when you stop negotiating your boundaries for approval, you stop attracting people who are only interested in crossing them. There is a signal most men are taught to ignore because it feels inconvenient, unromantic, and almost too subtle to trust. Yet it may be the most honest signal you will ever receive. It is not found in words, promises, or emotional displays. It shows up quietly in your body and your mind. After spending time with her, do you feel clearer or more confused, stronger or weaker, more focused on your purpose, or more distracted from it? Because if her presence drains your energy instead of sharpening your focus, What you are experiencing is not genuine interest. Real attraction does not deplete you, it nourishes you. This does not mean every interaction must feel euphoric or effortless. Depth comes with challenge. Growth requires friction, but there is a fundamental difference between constructive tension and chronic depletion. One expands you, the other slowly erodes you. When a woman's interest is real, her presence stabilizes your internal state. You feel more yourself, not less. You think more clearly. You move through your day with greater intention. Even when emotions are involved, they feel integrated, not overwhelming. You are not constantly pulled into her emotional weather system. You remain grounded in your own center. When interest is not genuine, your energy leaks. You may not notice it immediately. In fact, it often begins with excitement. Conversations run long. Messages demand attention. Emotional exchanges feel intense. But over time, something shifts. You feel mentally scattered. You replay interactions in your head. You lose focus on work, health, discipline. Your thoughts orbit her reactions instead of your direction. This is not love deepening. This is attention being hijacked. Psychologically, this happens when a relationship activates anxiety instead of security. Your nervous system stays alert, anticipating the next shift in tone, the next emotional demand, the next problem to solve. You are no longer choosing to engage, you are reacting. And reaction is the opposite of power. Genuine interest does not require constant emotional management. It does not pull you away from your life to sustain itself. It integrates into your life and supports it. If being with her consistently leaves you tired, foggy, or restless, your system is telling you something your mind may not want to hear. Energy does not lie. Many older men dismiss this signal because they are used to carrying weight, responsibility, pressure, stress. They assume emotional exhaustion is normal. They pride themselves on endurance. But relationships are not meant to be another burden you tolerate. They are meant to be a place where strength is reinforced, not consumed. Ask yourself this honestly after time with her. Do you feel motivated to move forward in your life? Or do you feel like you need rest just to recover from the interaction? Do you feel inspired to be disciplined, focused, and purposeful? Or do you feel pulled into emotional loops that lead nowhere? Genuine attraction aligns with your forward motion. Fake attraction competes with it. Another important distinction is how conflict affects your energy. In healthy dynamics, conflict is draining in the moment, but clarifying afterward. You feel relief once something is addressed. You feel closer, clearer, more aligned. In unhealthy dynamics, conflict leaves residue, it lingers. You feel unsettled long after the conversation ends. Nothing truly resolves. The same issues resurface in different forms. That repetition is exhausting. Philosophically, energy drain is a sign of misalignment. When two people are aligned in values, pace, and emotional capacity, effort feels meaningful. When they are misaligned, even small interactions require disproportionate effort. You are pushing against something instead of moving with it. And no amount of chemistry can compensate for sustained misalignment. Pay attention to how often you feel the need to withdraw to regain yourself. Not because you value solitude, but because you feel overstimulated or emotionally depleted. Space should enhance connection, not be required for recovery. If distance is the only way you feel calm again, that calm is not coming from the relationship. Another overlooked signal is whether her presence sharpens your standards or lowers them. Genuine interest raises your baseline. You want to be better. You become more intentional. You hold yourself to higher integrity. When interest is not genuine, you start compromising. You ignore red flags. You justify behavior that conflicts with your values. You tell yourself you are being flexible, when in reality you are becoming fragmented. Fragmentation always costs energy. Men often confuse emotional investment with emotional return. They give attention, support, presence, and patience, assuming it will circle back. But when interest isn't genuine, the return never comes. The relationship becomes a one-way emotional expenditure. You give, she takes. You stabilize, she destabilizes. Over time, you feel emptied. A woman who genuinely desires you does not feed on your energy. She respects it. She is mindful of your time, your focus, your mental space. She does not create unnecessary problems to feel significant. She understands that your energy is not infinite, and she treats it accordingly. Manipulative interest, on the other hand, thrives on consumption. It requires constant input, attention, reassurance, validation, and the more you give, the more is demanded. There is no equilibrium, only escalation. Here is a grounding question to ask yourself: if nothing changed, if this dynamic continued exactly as it is, would you become stronger or weaker over time? Not more excited, not more attached, stronger or weaker? Your answer matters, because attraction that weakens you is not attraction worth maintaining. Desire that pulls you away from your purpose is not love, it is distraction. And distraction is expensive. Older men do not need more stimulation, they need resonance. They need connections that sharpen their thinking, not cloud it. Relationships that add weight to their words, not noise to their minds. So stop measuring interest by how intense it feels and start measuring it by how you function within it. Your energy is a reflection of truth. Protect it, because when a woman's interest is genuine, her presence will not drain you. It will steady you. And the moment you choose steadiness over exhaustion, you reclaim your direction. And nothing is more attractive than a man who moves forward without losing himself.